You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. We got local, state, national, covering down on all the issues, sometimes international. And like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to Tuesday, and Boomer is on the board. Hey, brother, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Tuesday. That's all I got to say.
We call it Camel Eve. It's Camel Eve is what it is.
It is. I did watch the national championship last night, even though my team wasn't in it.
Yeah.
So it was not a very fun game to watch. I mean, if you were a Georgia fan.
If you're a Georgia fan.
It was an awesome game to watch.
I guess at some point you almost get to where, even if a Georgia fan, I would imagine you start feeling sorry for TCU. I mean,
right.
I watched that kind of off and on sporadically, like, paying attention, not paying attention, paying attention, not paying attention. I had predicted to a friend after the show last night that, Georgia would win by 14. I had no idea.
Just a few more.
Phil does not need to be involved in laying odds because he does not know what he's doing there, I can just tell you. But, yep, all right. Hey, listen, we got a full slate for you. No callers today because the content of the Dippers is so full, we wanted to stick with it. And you guys can call in and fill up any spaces you want to, so there's that. But in the meantime, hit that sound effect.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper. 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you have got to know as we run today's show. Number 1, I'm calling it good for the gander. You heard that old phrase. I almost kind of hate that phrase, really. Good for the goose is good for the gander. Well, the gander just wound up having a whole bunch of documents found in his office. So you may have heard the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Oh, the horror. They found documents that were allegedly classified. Who could it be? What's happened? What violations? What nuclear secrets? Oh, by the way, they just found some in Biden's office too? We'll talk about it in great detail. What's good for the gander is coming up as number 1 on the Triple Dipper. And then number 2, I'm going to call it home fries. Home fries. We gotta talk about what's happening around the house here, around the state of Alabama. And there's some things that have happened, some good, some bad. Had some great reports come back about what outsiders think of Alabama, good stuff like how many people are moving here. And then you got things too like a major shooting yesterday in Madison, on Highway 72 in Madison. Over 200 rounds were fired. I mean, you can go to the range and not pick up 200 rounds of brass. Brass was everywhere. We're going to talk about it. That's home fries coming up number 2 on the Triple Dipper. And then third thing I'm going to do, I started doing a segment yesterday regarding the border. And then I realized there's so much happening south of the border that's a segment by itself. So I've got a section we're going to do here called the failed state of Mexico. Is it a failed state? You know what? There are some that are calling it at the very least a floundering state or a fragile state. Those are actual terms being used by officials in the know. So we're going to talk about that, what's happening on our southern border regions at the failed state of Mexico. All right, let me do this. Let me jump over and hit my comments for a few minutes. Now, there's a movement afoot to do some things in government that are different. You hear about the House rules. We talked about them yesterday. There's things they want to change. And then you hear about things like liberals wanting to pack the court, and things like, we need to amend the Constitution to get rid of the Second Amendment. That's just in the way. Or for that matter, just pretend it's not there in the first place. Okay. Sometimes different is good. Sometimes different is bad. But I'll be honest with you. Sometimes continuity and predictability and good order mean as much to good governance as policy does. Now, James Madison, one of our founders, he's one of the chief authors of the U.S. Constitution. He rejected the idea that government should be whimsical or prone to amend itself on the polls of a fickle populace. In Federalist number 62, Madison denounced what he referred to as volatility in governance. He wrote, quote, "Great injury results from an unstable government. The want of confidence in the public councils damps every useful undertaking, the success and profit of which may depend on a continuance of existing arrangements." Basically, what Madison said in such flowery language was that in terms of good governance, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So yeah, people are always thinking up a new way of doing things or getting to a result quicker than before. But sometimes you come across a piece of special equipment or a way of doing things or a special document or whatever. Sometimes something comes along and it just works, and it works and it keeps on working and it becomes almost ubiquitous. You expect to see it there because you're so used to it. It works. Something you expect to see or expect to say or expect to use. And sometimes those things can become even generational when layers of family history have been touched by the same thing. Like, for instance, you may not have thought of this one, but the Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun has been in use continuously in the service since 1942. 42. That means that same piece of equipment, in this case the big Ma Deuce, has been handled by my grandfather, my father, myself, and now my son while each of us serve our time in uniform. That's amazing. It's a classic example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But listen, y'all, there's one item, as I get into my points here, there's one item that has done more work to win wars, move ships, start and finish careers, and provide logistics than perhaps any piece of generational legacy equipment that any item in the U.S. government's inventory. Now, it's an item that may surprise you. It may surprise you because of its longevity and because of its simplicity. It's an item that anyone who has served in the military or ever served as a federal employee of any type has likely used at some point in time. And this year, this classic bit of generational supply room wonder turns 55 years old with no signs that it's going to be taken off the shelves of the U.S. supply rooms anytime soon. I know you're curious. Some of you have already guessed what it is. It's the famous small black Skillcraft ink pen. Oh, I mean, a bunch of y'all just went there in your minds. You can picture it. And if you haven't, just picture this. It's the famous little small black one. I kid you not, the little thin black pen with the silver clicker on top. It always comes in a plain brown box in usual government style with the government NSN or national stock number on the outside. Since 1968, y'all, the Skillcraft pen has been made under contract by the National Industries for the Blind using the Skillcraft name. And like most things in government, it has to meet long-standing, strict mandated requirements. Get this. Here's what a Skillcraft pen has to be able to do. It has to be able to write a continuous line 1 mile long and be able to do it in temperatures ranging from minus 40 degrees to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The ink must be able to dry within 5 seconds without smearing or blotting. It must be capable of being submerged in water for up to 48 hours. And it must be able to withstand 2 bleachings when you leave it in your pocket for washing. They also have to be exactly 5 1/8 inch long, so they can be fully inserted into a uniform pocket without sticking out. But like most good things that hang around long enough, folks figure out other things you can do with them. Like what can you do with a Skillcraft pen? Well, I'm told that in the Navy on a nautical map, sailors can expect the pen's length to be almost exactly equal to 150 nautical miles. That's kind of cool. Combat engineers have found the pen to be the same length as a 2-minute fuse. And stories abound and even made it into an episode of MASH one time about medics using half of a Skillcraft pen to perform a battlefield tracheotomy to help injured troops breathe. And I can tell you personally for a fact that in the backwoods of northern Afghanistan, my sorry old Russian-made UAZ Jeep broke down and my Afghan bodyguard determined that we had a leaking fuel line, so he took my Skillcraft pen, he clipped off a bit of the lower half, he cut a section of the fuel line and fitted it right in, and voila! We made it back to the safe house with a field-expedient Skillcraft fuel line. Thank you, Skillcraft. So why am I telling you the story? Well, because sometimes the old adage is still true that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's not just some old man yelling about hating change, not at all. I recognize that sometimes a new development or a new technology will come along and change something that we're all used to, and I'm fine with that. But the Skillcraft pen will be around as long as the government uses paper because it works, because it's cost-effective, because it's readily available, and because it fits a viable need. And much like that little piece of plastic and ink, there are some things that do not need to be changed. Like, for instance, for me personally, I believe the Bible is the unerring Word of God. It stood a test of time. It still operates with full effectiveness today. Efforts to change, abridge, or deny its efficacy are just unwarranted. For 2,000 years it has stood, and it has worked, and the Bible is not broken. Or the U.S. Constitution and its Bill of Rights, those are foundational. They've weathered many a storm. I realize the Constitution can in fact be amended. That's what the Bill of Rights is. But the manner and means for doing so is sacred, and it cannot be changed. There should always be good order and discipline, public debate, and a ratification of the states. And I mean, sure, there's a possibility of an Article 5 convention, but generally speaking, that has never happened. In 235 years, because we have a formal process for amendments, there has only been 27 amendments. It's special. It's what the founders intended. It still works. The Constitution is not broken. And while we're on it, there was a lot of ballyhoo this past week on the manner and the means by which a Speaker of the House was able to be selected. But it worked. It was messy, but it was accountable. And it gave voice to the smallest number of representatives who otherwise might have been ignored. The House rules, they're not broken. So you can complain about something and decide you don't like it, but then you have to look at it and decide, if it still works, should we fix it? Well, I'm of the mind that if it still works, if it is still considered highly effective, if it serves a valuable purpose, if it's approachable, attainable, affordable, and has endured the test of times and the whims of men, then it might be valuable. The Bible, the Constitution, the standing rules of the House, a Skillcraft pen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's a wrap for the Right Side Way. There you have it. Yeah, James Madison, he had it going on when he said that literally what you don't want to do is find some kind of means by which you discontinue existing arrangements because great injury, he said, results from an unstable government. There are some things that just aren't broken. So the efforts to constantly fix because someone has a whim, well, that's called culture. And there are some things that should survive culture. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.